I think if I knew how complex was trucking, I think I would have thought again. So the unknown was very helpful.
Gaurav Biswas thought he had landed on a simple idea: Uber, but for trucks. There was just one problem. He had never moved a truck in his life. Then one day at dinner with friends, he saw a problem he had never thought much about.
He was constantly having to walk out of the restaurant, and we could see that he's arguing or shouting with somebody. I was like, hey, is everything okay? He's like, oh, I have 7 containers that have to go on the same vessel tomorrow. Then I said, hey, why you should have an Uber of trucks?
That idea became TruKKer, a digital freight platform that connects companies that need to move cargo with the truck owners and transporters that carry it.
TruKKer is the largest digital freight network across the GCC, Turkey, and South Asia.
Across the Gulf, much of trucking is still fragmented. Small truck owners, phone calls, paperwork, brokers, and long waits for payment.
Trucking is extremely important as a sector because whatever you touch and feel, consume, it's all touched a truck. Whether it's a seaport or an airport or a factory, everything that we consume moves. Trucking is that connector.
There are 3 numbers to look out for in TruKKer's story. 48 hours, how long Gaurav says it took for him to decide to take on the trucking industry. 75,000 plus, the number of trucks now connected across TruKKer's network. And up to $300 million, the financing facility TruKKer secured in 2026 from Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, as the company pushes toward its next stage of growth. This is Founder Effect.
My name is Gaurav Biswas. I'm the founder and CEO of TruKKer.
Before TruKKer, Gaurav was an outsider to logistics, but not to complex infrastructure. He grew up in a 3rd-generation business family in India, trained as a structural engineer, and became one of the youngest directors at global engineering firm AECOM. After the dinner that sparked his Uber for Trucks idea, he went home and started researching the industry.
2 days of Googling told me that the trucking sector is one of the largest sectors in any economy. So you take agriculture, construction, trucking. It is significantly unorganized and unsophisticated.
He decided to go for it. What made that quick turnaround possible was his co-founder, childhood friend Pradeep Mallavedappu, who already ran a software company.
I didn't want to wait to then hire engineers, and then Pradeep brought 17 people on day 1. This dinner was mid-October. We'd had a beginning of December, we had an MVP.
But TruKKer didn't start in the Gulf. It started in India in late 2015. And the first version struggled, with the 2 founders funding the early build themselves.
Between the 2 of us, I was funding the cash and he was funding the people. We got more than $500,000 from our own bank of mom and dad and your own money. In India, we spent money in distributing 3,000 smartphones, from our own funds. Because we thought the driver will adopt if he has a smartphone. In 2016, not every driver had a smartphone.
But they had an even bigger problem at hand. India's freight market was too sprawling for the young company. Customers did not want one clean, long-haul route. They wanted trucks moving from one city to many destinations, across both short and long distances. To make that work, TruKKer needed a denser network and much more capital than it had.
In India, you can go anywhere to anywhere. And when you go to a company, they don't want you to just give your trucks to Bombay. They say, hey, I want my trucks to Surat also, and also to the destination which is 500 kilometers away and not 2,000 kilometers away. So that caused us to create a network, and that scale required a lot of investment.
So in 2016, the founders made the hard call. They paused operations in India in July, and by October, they had relaunched in the UAE, a market whose long-haul routes better matched what they were trying to build.
When we realized that, oh no, we need to make something simpler, let's try and raise smaller and build something and prove it to ourselves. So if you look at Oman, say Muscat to Jeddah, you pretty much connect in a linear line all the main human hubs and industrial hubs. So like, okay, let's do long-haul trucking in this linear line. And that worked, and we raised money.
Walking away from India taught Gaurav the lesson he repeats most.
As founders, and especially in tech products, where you have to obviously have something solving better and faster, you must not get emotionally, attached to a solution that you think is a great solution.
Restarting in the UAE meant trying to raise outside money and convincing investors that TruKKer could win in a market where others had already attracted far more capital.
There was another Indian startup, and they're very successful, listed in India, called Blackbuck. They had raised $100 million Series A. And most investors that would decline us would say, oh, why would you be successful? Somebody else is solving the same problem and has been funded $100 million. And you would not have an easy answer to that one.
The first outside believer came after a startup competition in Bahrain in 2017.
Ali Salim, the first angel or non-family friends, called me after we had won second prize in the MIT Arab competition in Bahrain, and he wanted to know more about the business, and then he gave us a $200,000 check.
And more capital followed. TruKKer's backers came to include some of the region's biggest names: Abu Dhabi's ADQ and Mubadala, Saudi Arabia's STV, and Bahrain's Investcorp. Then in 2026, TruKKer secured up to $300 million in financing from Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, backed by customer receivables, the money it expects to collect from shippers across its freight network. Early on in his journey, Gaurav rode along in a truck to better understand the people he was building for.
I went on a truck from Porbandar to Delhi when we started in India, just to know his life. And they have a hard life. It's one of the hardest professions in the world. Imagine you don't sleep at home for days and months, and sometimes in years. In the summer, you don't make enough money to actually keep your air conditioning on. So you actually go below the trailer while you're parked, because it's at least a shaded place. And while you're sleeping, you're still a security for your cargo, because if somebody nicks something out of it, you are responsible.
Gaurav says one of the biggest pain points for drivers and small transporters was payment, not just whether they would get paid, but when, and whether the price would change after the job.
Their trust is primarily on you promising and delivering. Is that they have brokers who would pay them, listen, today I don't have the money, do the second trip, I'll pay you for both together. And this happens. This is a real problem in that sector. So for us, that payment is the main trigger which gives you the trust. You work with TruKKer, you always get paid. And you get paid what you were told when you were taking the cargo, not a second negotiation.
That promise became central to TruKKer's supply network. If carriers trusted the platform, the company could bring more trucks into the system and expand into new routes and regions.
UAE, Saudi Arabia is our home ground. We move cargo across the GCC into Levant, North Africa, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and the CIS part of the world. We remain focused on long haul because it's a mega sector.
So, how does it actually work? At its simplest, TruKKer is a matchmaker, connecting companies that need to move goods with the truck owners and transporters that can carry them. But each match is far more complicated than calling a ride.
There were 30 to 70 different factors that involve the matchmaking of a demand and a supply. In Uber, you and the driver are the two decision makers. And here, there are 15 plus other people, stakeholders, who influence that decision. You pay 100 dirhams for a cab transaction and you pay thousands of dollars for a trucking transaction. So it's Uber of trucks, it's not Uber at all.
Gaurav has learned that technology can only take the company so far.
We scaled into a certain country, which we did not have the core competence of understanding the country, or we did not have the right people from day one who just went from technology. While we knew that our business is not Uber. You can't just make another city live, forget about making another country live without doing custom work. And we did that. And then we got out in 6 months.
He says that mistake cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I constantly make mistakes. I think it's very important. I think if you're not making mistakes, then you're not trying things. Dad used to always say that in business, don't get overeducated. He says, hey, listen, beyond a certain point, analysis is going to tell you everything not to do. And you will be overeducated to never be able to take a risk.
Trucking usually only becomes visible when something goes wrong. For Gaurav, one test came during disruption around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important trade choke points.
The company's ability to be the infrastructure, I think, has become quite evident during the Strait of Hormuz crisis. We have markets and lanes which have scaled from 10 to 500 overnight, and those are things that you can't do without having that strong technology layer allowing that scale up.
For Gaurav, it proved a bigger point. Trucking is not just everyday logistics. In moments of disruption, it becomes strategic infrastructure.
I feel GCC has an unfair issue. We are the highest traffic through this route where somebody else controls the traffic light. This one is showing that how trucking is so important to have these alternate things in place.
And because the market is still so fragmented, he thinks the opportunity is barely tapped.
be the largest operator in the region by number of transactions and revenues and all of that, bigger than the biggest fleet companies, but we're less than 1% market share. So, the problem's too big. More people are welcome to solve it.
The company has discussed a possible IPO path, but Gaurav frames that as just one possible milestone.
Personally, I don't care whether we're a public company or a private company, as long as we can keep making that impact.
After a decade in a sector he once thought could be solved like ride-hailing, Gaurav is careful not to make entrepreneurship sound clean or easy. The first idea was simple. Executing on it was much more complex. But for Gaurav, the lesson is still to try.
My mom, she would always reward me for trying something. She always would say that, hey, it's better to be somebody who always does something than somebody who's waiting to be told what to do. So yes, just make an attempt.